Philip.
Hello, Bill. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while since we managed to get this. Our technology let us down, and
Well, you know what they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder.
there you go. So we're going to get back to our study of the Gospel of Mark. We're going to be in chapter 1. And let me begin reading in verse 21. And today, even though we have been taking a big chunk today, hopefully to the end of the chapter. Yeah, all the way to the end of the chapter. So let me read this, and then we'll come back and talk about it a little bit. And they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and was teaching. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one who had authority and not as the scribes. And immediately there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit. And he cried out, What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. But Jesus rebuked him, saying, Be silent, come out of him. And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying out with a loud voice, came out of him. And they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, saying, What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. And at once his fame spread everywhere throughout all the surrounding region of Galilee. And immediately he left the synagogue and entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law lay ill with a fever, and immediately they told him about her. And he came up and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, and they found him and said to him, Everyone is looking for you. And he said to them, Let us go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came out. And he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. And a leper came to him, imploring him and kneeling, and said to him, If you will, you can make me clean. Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I will, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And Jesus sternly charged him and sent him away at once, and said to him, See that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded, for a proof to them. But he went out and began to talk freely about it and to spread the news, so that Jesus could no longer openly enter a town, but was out in desolate places, and people were coming to him from every quarter. Wow, what a text when things get rolling.
They really roll, don't they?
They get rolling. The one thing to me that this section focuses on is the idea of the authority that Jesus possessed.
Right.
And he demonstrates that authority in some different ways. Authority with his teaching, but also authority over demons, authority over physical illness. At least those three different ways that he exercises and demonstrates his authority. And I find that to be interesting. And once again, what Mark does for us is he tells us what happened, and he tells us how people responded. But there's some things in here that he doesn't really explain. Honestly, I find that not infrequently in Scripture.
Yeah, I don't think he explains to us what Jesus taught, for one thing.
Yeah, he doesn't. There's no outline. There's not even here are the subjects that he covered. I have an idea about that, simply because of things that we have read and talked about earlier in this chapter, having to do with the kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm.
And And so I'm pretty sure, I think it would be a safe thing to say that what Jesus was talking about was the kingdom of God.
It would be easier for us to understand the astonishment that the hearers had if we knew what he was teaching.
Oh yes, absolutely it would. So and even that's a guess, you know, but
Sure.
I think it's a fairly safe guess. But let's just think about this thing about authority, because Mark reports for us that when people heard Jesus teach in the synagogue, for example, that they were astonished, they were amazed, they were surprised, they were shocked, you can think of a whole lot of
Sure.
descriptive words that probably would fit their response to his teaching, but it all comes down to what Mark focuses on, the fact that Jesus didn't teach like other people.
Right.
It's not that they were unaccustomed to teachers, but the way Jesus taught, or what he taught, or how he communicated it, something about all of that carried some authority with it.
Well, I think his teaching in comparison to what the scribes had taught, they were viewed as being interpreters. They were viewed as being these people that knew more than everybody else. And then here Jesus came along, and he didn't say according to so and so. He used, you know, I and me, and he didn't have to rely on what somebody else had told him.
Yes, I think that's got to be heart and center of the kind of the way that Jesus was teaching people. The idea of authority itself is interesting to me. When you think about somebody who has authority, what do you think about?
Oh, well, I would think about police. I would think about.
Yeah, okay. Let's just take police, for example.
Sure.
Why does a policeman possess authority?
Someone has given them that authority.
Yeah.
Someone has established a role for them that gives them the authority within boundaries to do what they need to do.
Yeah. And if they didn't have that authority, it would be impossible for a policeman to do whatever it is.
Exactly. There'd be chaos.
You couldn't even direct traffic if you didn't have some authority. The fact that all people in automobiles, you know, obey the traffic cop, it illustrates that we understand here's a man exercising some degree of authority. What else comes to mind when you think about authority?
Well, I would think of the government for one.
All right.
The people that are charged with enacting laws that affect all of us in some way, and those elected officials have received their authority from the electorate. The people that voted for them in office are the people that empowered them,
Right.
and gave them the authority to do what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's true. And then you can think about pretty much, in fact, I can't think of an area of life that there isn't somebody with some kind of authority.
Sure.
In a home, I like to think that parents have some authority. Sometimes in today's world, it's not the parents who exercise the authority, it's the children.
Sure. Yeah.
But still, there is some authority, and I think we would all probably argue that the parent should have the authority. But at school, at home, everywhere you go, there is this idea of authority. When I've been in college classes, for example, I always felt that the person who was teaching that class exercised some authority, not just knowledge,
Sure.
but authority. Because you're there to pass a course. Even if you're auditing a course, you hope that you get something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've only audited 1 or 2 courses in my life, but even then, you audit based on what the instructor sets up as the guidelines for auditing. So everywhere you go, there is somebody with authority.
And your analogy about the classroom, that teacher, that professor, certainly has the authority over the class curriculum, but he or she has the authority over the decorum in the class. You're not going to cheat. You're not going to smoke a cigarette in the middle of class. You know, they have the authority to forbid and to, you know, set the rules.
Yeah. And if it weren't for that, it would be chaos.
It would be chaos. Yeah.
But now here's my conundrum, if you will. I think about all of that, and all of the things that we've talked about would be kinds of authority that would be common to all of us. But if I'm understanding what Mark is saying here, when Jesus showed up and taught in this synagogue on the Sabbath, what people witnessed was something out of the ordinary. This was not your normal authority, because honestly, the fellow who had taught in the synagogue the Sabbath before this one would have exercised some authority. Not that he ran the show, but he exercised some authority as the one who was conveying information or knowledge to other people. There would have been somebody who would have been the leader of the synagogue, under which everyone operated. And so here comes Jesus, and he speaks and teaches with an authority. He didn't like those other guys.
Yeah, what reading I've done on this subject, Bill, it seems that when the scribes taught the masses, there was possibly some interaction between the audience and the scribes, and maybe some questions and answers, and they gave their opinions. Jesus didn't allow for that. He didn't allow for you and me to give our opinion. He states as fact. And in other books of the Bible, and I think of the Sermon on the Mount in particular, Jesus several times says, "It has been said, but I say unto you."
Yeah.
He challenges the thinking of the time, and challenges it in a way that he leaves no doubt that he is in charge.
Yeah, I think that is on target. What it must have been like to have been in that room, to hear someone teach with this kind of authority. Scribes remind me a lot of modern day scholars, and you know, I think there's a potential problem in that we may end up dismissing the scholarship of scribes, or even dismissing the scholarship of modern scholars. We don't want to do that, because honestly, if there was anybody who understood and knew the law of Moses, for example, it would have been the scribes. Sure. These were the educated people of the day. But the reason they remind me of modern day scholars is when you think about what it takes for a scholar to speak scholarly, the guy can't speak just from himself.
No.
You got to footnote everything, and you got to find somebody else who said this to validate the fact that you were saying it again. In fact, you're better off if you could find 2 or 3 or 4 or 5
And
people.
you need some attribution, attribute that to someone.
Yeah. So it's I remember writing papers in school, and every paragraph would have at least one footnote. Mm-hmm. You know, even if I didn't quote anybody, what I was doing was drawing from the idea that somebody presented, and I would footnote that to indicate where I got it. So I've written papers that are pages and pages and pages long, all right? But when you look at it, all I did was amass a bunch of what other people had already said,
Sure.
which makes me wonder where was the original scholar?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You know, now, I don't want to make fun of that because this is all part and parcel of the scholastic effort, and I think that's good. And if nothing else, it avoids some guy just going out and winging it and saying things and claiming an authority that he doesn't possess.
Right.
But here's Jesus, who doesn't seem to depend on anybody except himself. And the people recognize, that here's a guy who's speaking with authority. And they don't seem to be rejecting what he says, at least not at this point. They are not rejecting it. I think they are just drinking it in.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because of what else accompanies this authority in his teaching.
And that's the action.
The action, yeah. What comes next is right there in the synagogue, there's a guy with an unclean spirit.
Right.
And this is an interesting interaction with this unclean spirit that you might otherwise refer to as a demon or some kind of evil spirit that would have been associated as a partner with Satan in some way. I don't know what this evil spirit was doing to this man, but it wasn't good. But I do find it interesting what this demon says to Jesus. You know, what have you to do with us?
Yeah, leave us alone.
Yeah. What, are you here to destroy us?
Mm-hmm.
And I've read in some places, people have suggested that this is not really a question, it's a statement. You have come to destroy us. Not have you come to destroy us, but you have come to destroy us. But what is interesting is that immediately Jesus exercises an authority over the demon, and basically it is to silence the demon. And it's very forceful. It's like in today's language we would say that he said, "Shut up."
Yeah.
You know, just shut it.
Yeah.
You know, and then commands the demon to, or the evil spirit to come out of the man. Okay, there's the convulsion, then the demon leaves the individual. And what happens next? Well, we don't know. Mark isn't interested in telling us what happens next. He isn't interested in telling us what the poor guy's life was like after that. He didn't even tell us any details about how the people around responded, except that he's telling this episode, I think, to emphasize this whole thing about the authority of Jesus. This is, as far as Mark is concerned, I think this is really important. And so if we go back to the very beginning of our discussion about this little book, one of the things that I told you was I had read that some people believe that the book of Mark may have been one of those books that someone would recite to hearers, because not everybody could read. And so it's not just that somebody would get up and read what Mark wrote. They would actually memorize it and almost like a performance. Maybe that's true. I do not doubt at all that that's exactly the way that some people heard it, because somebody had to speak it to them. But this is essential. And so as they're telling this story of Jesus, you're in the first chapter, and what you come face to face with is this idea of authority. So, and we read all these other things, and I would just, it's not that we're going to look at the rest of this in detail, but let me just mention briefly. We move from the synagogue, and they go to the house of Simon and Andrew, and Simon's mother-in-law is sick with a fever. Now, it doesn't say that she had a demon or an evil spirit. It says she had a fever.
Right.
And I do think that one of the interesting things about the Gospels, it seems to me that there is a distinction that's made between people who suffer from some sort of demon problem and people who have a physical illness. This lady seems to have had a physical illness. But he takes her by the hand, lifts her up, heals her, and she's so well, she gets up off the sick bed and
ministers, cooks supper for
yeah,
her. Something.
serves everybody. And then by the time the sun goes down, everybody's bringing their neighbor and their brother-in-law and their friend and their kids and whoever's got a problem, whether it is a demon problem or whether it is an illness problem. They're bringing these folks to Jesus. And the question is, why would they do that? Hands down, got to be something to do with his authority.
Yeah.
He's got the authority to speak to a demon and tell it to shut up and get out. I want to go check that out.
I want to see that. Yeah. My analogy, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one.
Yeah.
If he had just stopped short and said, I have this authority without proving it, that would have been a different situation.
Absolutely. So then early in the next morning, it's before sunrise, and he goes out to some lonely, desolate place and is praying, and Simon finds him and tells him everybody's looking for him, and Jesus' response is, hey, let's go on to the next town.
Mm-hmm.
And why? Well, it seems to me that he is giving an idea that, look, I didn't come to camp out here and just locate here.
Right.
We got to move around and reach a whole lot of people. And so he goes throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues, and again, casting out demons. And then the last little section in chapter 1 has to do with this leper, which is a beautiful passage and probably deserves a look all on its own, even though we're not going to do that. But what a wonderful passage. A leper who is the outcast of society. He's got to cry out, unclean, unclean, so that people will not get near him.
And his attitude, he also had a certain faith in Jesus.
Yes.
Jesus could heal him.
Yes.
He said, I know if you will, you will.
Yeah.
You can.
Right. And so Jesus says, I do will, and heals the man. The interesting thing at the end of this is he tells this guy, and I don't go out and tell anybody. I've always thought that was a little bit humorous.
Well, it's a little bit of reverse psychology.
Could be.
Don't, we talk and don't you tell anybody that I said that.
Right.
Well, in many cases, that's the first thing you do is you go out and tell somebody, it's...
and that's exactly what happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you can understand if a guy has leprosy and all of a sudden he's healed of his leprosy.
Yeah. Why wouldn't he want to tell everyone, especially if the people around him knew that he had had leprosy, and suddenly he takes up his bed and he's walking and he's healed.
Yeah. Now I'm going to assume that he did what Jesus told him to do. He goes to the priest, and the priest does the inspection job that he's supposed to, and they go through all the process of determining whether or not this man is actually healed from his leprosy. I'm going to assume that all that takes place. But you're exactly right. Don't you think this guy's going to go home now? Don't you think he is now not going to avoid people or call out unclean so that they can not come near? No. And there will be people who know him and who knew for sure, poor old Joe Blow, a guy had bad leprosy. That's just awful. And now, wait a minute, here's Joe coming down the street. Joe,
what happened?
How did this happen?
Yeah.
This is very uncommon for someone who had leprosy to be healed. Well, don't you think there are going to be some questions? Hey, how did this happen?
Well, there certainly were questions because that last verse tells us that as Jesus moved on, it was, there were crowds waiting on him wherever he went,
Right.
because they had heard of perhaps the healing of the leprosy or some of the other things he did, and they wanted, they wanted part of that too.
Yes.
Whatever malady they had, they wanted to be healed by it.
Yeah, it's like wildfire,
Yeah, sure.
This is going to spread. Not only did it spread from the guy who was the previous leper, okay, but it had to spread from everybody who came in contact with him after that. Hey, I saw Joe today. You won't believe what happened to him.
Yeah.
So this has got to be, the word of mouth thing has just got to be fantastic.
And I find it interesting, Bill, that later on in some other books, the Pharisees claim that he is doing what he's doing by the power of Beelzebub. They try to question his authority and attribute it to something else.
Right.
And that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll get to that.
Sure.
But Jesus has some good questions for them.
Absolutely he does. Yeah, he turns them on their heads.
Yeah. So, as I think about this, and here we are today, we're a couple thousand years down the road from Jesus preaching about the kingdom and teaching with authority in the synagogues and casting out demons and healing people of their diseases. And so often, to me, the question is, okay, so what? So now what? What does this mean to me? Anything? So that's a question I think that's worth pursuing. Here's Mark telling the story about this man who taught in synagogues but did not teach like anybody else, taught with authority, and then demonstrated the extent of his authority with the exercise of that authority over demons, physical illnesses, and maybe more.
Mm-hmm. Well, it teaches us today of the enormous power that our Savior manifested when he was here on earth, but also the power that he has now as he sits on the right hand of God and makes intercession for us. No one else has the authority to do that.
Yeah. That's a lot of authority.
That is a lot of authority.
It is a unique authority. It's not the kind of authority that we run into anywhere else. Even with religious figures, we might run into any number of religious figures who claim an authority because they've got certain ideas about life, they've got a certain philosophy about how to live life, they've got a moral philosophy, they've got a practical philosophy about what you should do to fulfill your existence as a human being, whatever. And some of those are, there's a lot there's really nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's got some positive stuff
Sure.
that anybody could appreciate. But based on what authority?
Mm-hmm.
Based on what authority?
Well, when you and I were coming up, we were taught to respect authority. I mean, that there were certain things that, we respected because they were in a position of authority. Well, over time in our society, it seems that many people have begun to question authority. And authority that at one time was good is now viewed in a different light, and perhaps there are people that want to turn that authority upside down and really do away with any authority.
Yeah.
And you can't live that way.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that you never actually get rid of authority.
No.
You'll just exchange your authority from this to that.
Mm-hmm.
But we all operate
Yeah,
on some
absolutely.
kind of, we operate on something because we believe it to be true or right or good, and so because of that, we will function accordingly. We may not like the classic sources of authority. That's okay. Human authority is always up for question, and I don't see anything really wrong with that. And I would probably say that Jesus wouldn't even mind if you wondered about his authority, because I don't believe he is afraid of that kind of examination. In fact, I think he will invite.
I think he certainly challenged authority in his day,
Yeah.
whether it be the Pharisees or whatever. He challenged their authority. And I think you're right. And looking at authority through that lens is probably a healthy thing.
I think it is, and even sometimes I hear people say, "Well, I don't know about this God stuff or this Jesus stuff," and sometimes Christians kind of come down hard on that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we might not want to be too hard on that. I don't mind a person asking, why would we believe in Jesus? Why do you believe in Jesus? Why would you accept his claim of authority? Because that invites an examination.
Mm-hmm.
That invites a look at the man, and hopefully an examination of the evidence to prove who he is.
But there's a lot, you're exactly right, but there are certain people who want to question the authority of Christ and why we believe in sort of a gotcha kind of way.
And that's not really an examination.
No, it's not.
That's just a criticism.
That's right, yeah. And they have already made up their mind.
Yeah.
And they're just seeking to bolster their own view.
Yeah, which is fine. And that's not a real examination of the person Jesus. But on the other hand, I think it's possible for Christians to just kind of go along. They've never asked the question at all about this. And so as far as they are concerned, this is just something that you accept as true, but they don't really know why. Mm-hmm. So even for that person, I would say maybe a good examination, not to doubt, but just to firm up. Mm-hmm. Get the answers in your head clear and clean would probably be a healthy thing.
I tend to call that inherited faith.
Yeah.
That you believe what you believe because somebody else believed it.
Mom and Daddy, Grandpa.
Yeah, and you respected them. And I think you're right. I think the Bible teaches us to examine ourselves, examine whether we're in the faith, to ask some hard questions about what we believe, and more importantly, why we believe it.
Yeah. So let me kind of bring this down to an ending with this idea. As we've got people who are watching these videos, and maybe they're wondering, well, why are we having this discussion? What is this really all about? Yeah. And I suppose from my point of view, I would say what I would encourage people to take away from this section is Marcus is presenting us something about this man Jesus. And what he's telling us is that here's a guy who possessed authority like nobody ever possessed. And he demonstrated his authority in observable ways, exercising that authority over evil spirits, demons, physical illnesses. When you take the evil spirits, demons, and physical illness authority, I think that should at least suggest that whatever it is that he's saying and teaching probably carries the same authority. But it's worth digging into. Mm-hmm. It's worth thinking about. Maybe one of the worst things that Christians can do along this line
is to discourage people from searching and studying and really legitimately taking Jesus seriously and looking at why. Why would you want to believe in this guy? Okay, we're beginning to get some reasons here why we should look at him and believe in him. So at least consider it. Take it into consideration. Take the story as a whole. Don't just stop here, because we got way more to go before we get through just the book of Mark. But I think it is an encouragement to people to give Jesus a serious look and to hear from Mark in this case. Why? Why would you want to do that? What is he all about? And why should I pay any attention to him? I think the same thing works today.
It certainly does.
Back then. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, this is fun. Always fun to me. And thank all of you folks for listening and viewing these videos. We always appreciate you doing that. So we're going to act like real YouTubers at the end. Give us a thumbs up. Click on the subscribe thing. Share the video with others. When you do that, it really helps us to get the word out that these videos exist online and are available to people. So, thank you much, and we will see you next time.